Ms. Williams, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, April. What a thing to be back in Mississippi, even if just in spirit. Though I think we all know by now that it's more than that. These strange in-between spaces we've been finding our lives in these many months. I spend a lot of my life, certainly my professional life as a writer, working to reframe things. Not rewrite them, but revisit them so that we might understand them better. It's the work of remembering. And again, not redefining, but expanding definitions. Open any decent dictionary and most of the best words have more than one meaning. Or perhaps the meaning of the word has changed over time. 2020 taught us that we are going to have to expand our working definition of what here means, because I am here with you. I think a lot of me will always be in Mississippi, or maybe I take Mississippi with me. It's here wherever I go. I claim this place. I claim this state. I became the kind of woman I wanted to be here, the kind of Black American I wanted to be here, the kind of writer I wanted to be here. So much of me evolved so fast when I set up my first home in Greenwood a decade ago, that the person I was becoming before Mississippi redirected my course seems almost recognizable to me now. And it's not just the years that made the difference. It's the particular, peculiar, wretched, howling preciousness of this state. My time in Mississippi started in the Delta, and that's fitting. The name of the place means change. And so much of you changes when you go breathe the air there, tread your feet there. Now, I can't even begin to talk about Oxford, my home after the Delta. Suffice to say, it was the grandest stretch of uninterrupted happiness in my life, living just off the square, the most lasting happy I've had besides my time at the other Oxford in England. But that's all a talk for another time. I'm not here to talk about my personal joys. I'm here to talk about the bigger picture and the place that brought me to it. Mississippi is maybe the only place on earth I don't feel gaslit when I talk about the trouble with the idea of America, the divide between the reality of it and the dream of it. Because down here, it's as plain as the train tracks that still divide one half of any Delta town from the other, the student bodies of any white flight academy from their defunded public counterparts. Mississippi is the only place on earth a white person has called me a nigger to my face without fear or trepidation, not out of a speeding car, but in shared space, and neither of us planning to leave the room before or after the event. Mississippi is the reason that that man brandishing the Confederate battle flag in the Capitol on January 6th was not even any kind of history maker. I refuse to dignify him with that superlative for many reasons, but beyond anything else, the Magnolia State made sure that that fraught battle flag flew every day in the Capitol. So y'all finally did the right thing and wiped the symbol of hate away with a resilient bloom this past November. Name the best part of this place. It's change. During my first year of graduate school here at the University of Mississippi, I'll never call the school Ole Miss. That's a slave master's wife, not an alma mater. But again, I digress. In February of 2013, I had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles for an event. I remember being in a car driving past film studios and saying to my mother, "This place reminds me in a way of Mississippi." She looked at me with incredulity, maybe a kind of wonder, and I clarified. In LA, it feels like anything is possible. Like if you dream it, you could bring it to life on screen. There's a magic in that. And in Mississippi, it feels like anything could happen. Life or death, or a ghost, or a gift, or a wild animal, or some crisis wind, or some miracle could be around any corner. Every second of every day is like that. Anything could happen. And there's even more magic in it. Mississippi fills me with wonder because it's the best and worst of all that America is, all the time. And there's no way to hide from either side of it. The terrible systemic iniquities, the ridiculous weather, the living things that will consume the skin from your body, the house from under you, the relative lawlessness that means any back road is a chaos highway for good or ill. And here's my favorite part. In Mississippi, so much of the human wrought best touches, the music, the food, the good history, the hard work, the cadences, and the triumphant transcendence from trauma, well, it's all very Black, isn't it? And God help me, I love it for that most of all. So I was invited to speak with you here today, at least in some small part or some large part, I think, because of an essay I wrote this summer entitled, "You Want a Confederate Monument? My Body is a Confederate Monument." I feel I would be remiss if I did not revisit that piece with you here today. In many ways, I wrote it as a testimony to be spoken aloud and engaged with. So I will take that opportunity to do that now and look forward to engaging with you after. I have rape-colored skin. My light brown Blackness is a living testament to the rules, the practices, the causes of the Old South. If there are those who want to remember the legacy of the Confederacy, if they want monuments, well then, my body is a monument. My skin is a monument. Dead Confederates are honored all over this country with cartoonish private statues, solemn public monuments, and even in the names of United States Army bases. It fortifies and heartens me to witness the protests against this practice and the growing clamor from serious, nonpartisan public servants to redress it. But there is a difference between rewriting and reframing the past. I say it is not a matter of airbrushing history, but of adding a new perspective. I am a Black Southern woman, and of my immediate white male ancestors, all of them were rapists. My very existence is a relic of slavery and Jim Crow. According to the rule of hypodescent, the social and legal practice of assigning a genetically mixed race person to the race with less social power, I am the daughter of 2 Black people, the granddaughter of 4 Black people, the great-granddaughter of 8 Black people. Go back one more generation, and it gets less straightforward and more sinister. As far as family history has always told, and as modern DNA testing has allowed me to confirm, I am the descendant of Black women who were domestic servants and white men who raped their help. It is an extraordinary truth of my life that I am biologically more than half white, and yet I have no white people in my genealogy in living memory, no voluntary whiteness. I am more than half white, and none of it was consensual. White Southern men, my ancestors, took what they wanted from women they did not love, over whom they had extraordinary power, and then failed to claim their children. What is a monument but a standing memory? An artifact to make tangible the truth of the past. My body and blood are a tangible truth of the South and its past. The Black people I come from were owned by the white people I come from. The white people I come from fought and died for their lost cause. And I ask you now, who dares to tell me to celebrate them? Who dares to ask me to accept their mounted pedestals? You cannot dismiss me as someone who doesn't understand. You cannot say it wasn't my family members who fought and died. My Blackness does not put me on the other side of anything. It puts me squarely at the heart of the debate. I don't just come from the South, I come from Confederates. I've got rebel gray, blue blood coursing my veins. My great-grandfather Will was raised with the knowledge that Edmund Pettus was his father. Pettus, the storied Confederate general, the grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, the man for whom Selma's Bloody Sunday Bridge is named. So I am not an outsider who makes these demands. I am a great-great-granddaughter. And here I'm called to say that there is much about the South that is precious to me. I do my best teaching and writing here. There is, however, a peculiar model of Southern pride that must now, at long last, be reckoned with. This is not an ignorant pride, but a defiant one. It is a pride that says, our history is rich, our causes are justified, our ancestors lie beyond reproach. It is a pining for greatness, if you will, a wish again for a certain kind of American memory, a monument-worthy memory. But here's the thing. Our ancestors don't deserve your unconditional pride. Yes, I am proud of every one of my Black ancestors who survived slavery. They earned that pride by any decent person's reckoning, but I am not proud of the white ancestors whom I know, by virtue of my very existence, to be bad actors. Among the apologists for the Southern cause and for its monuments, there are those who dismiss the hardships of the past. They imagine a world of benevolent masters and speak with misty eyes of gentility and honor and the land. They deny plantation rape, or explain it away, or question the degree of frequency with which it occurred. To those people, it is my privilege to say, I am proof. I am proof that whatever else the South might have been, or might believe itself to be, it was and is a space whose prosperity and sense of romance and nostalgia were built upon the grievous exploitation of Black life. The dream version of the Old South never existed. Any manufactured monument to that time in that place tells half a truth at best. The ideas and ideals it purports to honor are not real. To those who have embraced these delusions, now is the time to re-examine your position. Either you have been blind to a truth that my body's story forces you to see, or you really do mean to honor the oppressors at the expense of the oppressed, and you must at last acknowledge your emotional investment in a legacy of hate. Either way, I say the monuments of stone and metal, the monuments of cloth and wood, all the man-made monuments must come down. I defy any sentimental Southerner to defend our ancestors. To me, I'm literally made of reasons to strip them of their laurels. Since its publication, I've had so much feedback on this piece. Most of it wildly generous, which was happy, unexpected, and moving. But one of my favorite insights was hearing someone describe it as a kind of origin story, because the person who said that, well, he was right in a way. I wrote this piece to, as I like to put it, worry after some truths. I was raised very aware that my ancestors had been slaves. I was also raised very aware that my ancestors had also been people who owned slaves. I'm not unusual in coming from both. I think that my privilege has been knowing who the people were and feeling empowered to model how we re-examine our complicated ancestors. The children and grandchildren of SS officers have a regular practice of remembering the work of their forefathers with a real sense of reckoning and reproach. The same, to a lesser degree, holds true of those who inherited the burden of the oppressor's blood in post-apartheid South Africa. In writing my piece, I thought quite literally, where are the ancestors of the dead Confederates who are doing the work of restoration and repair and remonstrance in order for this place we love to heal? Then I thought, I am descended from dead Confederates. I am a Black woman. I will lead the way to the right side of history, like we always do. And past that point, I think origin stories matter as much for institutions and collective cultural groups as for individuals, if not more. We have to know where we come from in order to evolve. Part of why we love America is the idea that it could change. It's Article 5 of the Constitution. If you don't know it, well, suffice to say, the founding fathers left room for amendments. They knew that when we looked back, we would want to revise. It's how we get better. It's how we heal. We are so lucky to be living through a history-making moment of this magnitude. On this day, the last day of a demonstrably failed 4-year run, on the day before we inaugurate a white man who willingly, competently, and with great dignity served below a Black man, and then, when offered his position of power, brought with him a Black woman to secure his spot as, if not the most historic, then certainly the most gloriously book-ended president in our history. On this day especially, I wonder, who will the monuments remember from these days and months and years? How will we honor the great potential of this American experiment? Show the world a united face with the will, the fortitude, and the good faith to be a beacon beyond the founding fathers' wildest dreams. As a writer, I obviously turn to words first in trying to hammer out that kind of question. I love etymology. One source word or working definition of our word monument, and forgive my pronunciation, my Latin is entirely an amateur pursuit, comes from monere, which means to remind, to advise, or to warn. I think we forget about those last two parts, or they've fallen away from our familiar sense of the word as it's used today. I live my life in a body that I've called a monument, in what I like to call a body politic with a K. The term came about almost as a joke. It came to me tongue in cheek. It came as a bent note, a nudge, but also a mental paper cut, an unreachable itch. I'm obviously interested, albeit distantly, in the sort of medieval definition of a body politic as the people of a nation, state, or society considered collectively as an organized group of citizens, because of the ways in which my body, my genetic makeup, and my appearance complicate the story of how that set of relationships is supposed to be understood in America, in these southern spaces. But I'm more interested in the notion of how my body's story makes me reconsider and reframe the notion of realpolitik with a K. The system of politics or principles based on practical rather than moral or ideological considerations. Because the fact of the matter is that the practical principles of my life are based on what I consider to be the failures of the moral and ideological considerations of the people and ruling structures of this country. When I wrote that my body was a Confederate monument, I was getting to that point back in June. When I wrote in November that to chastise my country was to show my love for it, I was getting to that point, but more on that later. Living in my body as a monument, as part of the American body politic, continually forces me to consider questions through the lens of a realpolitik. This body politic living is a mutant child of Du Bois's double consciousness in a way. It's not to see myself twice, but to see the world for what it is rather than what it says it is in order to actually survive it. Let me put it another way. One of the worst fights my mother and I ever had was when I was first learning to drive. There was a hilly street near my house. Near the top of one of the hills, there was a T intersection with a stop sign for people merging onto the hilly street in question. Driving home one day with my mom in the car, she began telling me to slow down as we approached the intersection. I kept my foot on the gas and blew past it like I'd always done, calmly telling her that I had the right of way, but the other drivers had a stop sign. She had zero interest in this position. She taught me a lesson then that has been profoundly useful to me in contexts well beyond the specific concerns of this talk. Assuming that people will follow the rules or do the right thing, what it says on the paperwork when nobody's watching, that can and will get you killed if you don't make necessary preparations and take necessary precautions. Why would I just assume that the person at the stop sign would wait and see me? I might have been right about my right of way, but I could have been right and still dead, as she put it. Expecting America to do what it says about life and liberty and pursuing happiness and justice for all and all that, well, for Black people, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's a kind of assumption that can and will get you dead or broken in this country. Really, if you're just about any kind of other and you don't operate with and apply some kind of perspective. I'm writing and thinking and speaking louder and more regularly than I have ever in my life because I think people need to see how this looks in real time. I've lived so much in white spaces in this Black body, and I think it's time to talk more about what I've learned from figuring out how to survive it to the degree that I have, not just about myself, but about certain kinds of American blind spots, and ultimately how we might better give and receive necessary, tough love. I'm writing and thinking and speaking now because after the events, the end of May, the first week of June, I had to do something. I couldn't march because I have asthma. I was afraid of my own ability to breathe. But I couldn't spend another day wondering, is my whole life going to be defined by old American limitations? I had to say something. I've spent my whole life trying to figure out how to survive this. Now here, I'm going to pause and put on another one of my many hats, my poetry hat, because I'd like to share with you a couple of poems that are part of a longer piece coming out this year. The bigger project I can't talk about, but these words are mine, so I'm sharing them. And this is from a hybrid piece that's poetry and fiction called Rosie and Ghostcracker. You're about to hear from Rosie, a comeback spirit I've been living with for, well, years now. This first part is from the perspective of the land of Mississippi, which is audacious, I know, to try and speak for it, but I gave it my best shot. Call me a cradle and a nest. Call me Mississippi. I am everything wrong with Eden. And I am every hope for it before and after they fall. Say, feed me, Mississippi. Say, rest me, Mississippi. See this, my fist. See this, my raging growth. Say, can't see to can't see, Mississippi. Watch me grow these can't see beans. I mean white beans and salts pork gone smooth. Sweet almost, and with pepper slick down your tongue, can't see, to stop the belly from knocking her backbone, can't see, for a while. Say, oh God, help me eat to survive. Say, Oh Lord, let this spoon sustain me, this cupped lip holding its small covenant. I will eat today. Yes, I ate them all. I eat them all up. I have let the kudzu grow and grow and grow. And this green plant adores me, adorns me. And I let it live and eat things people try to keep safe. This house, ha! Its foundations, nothing. I let it eat these black bodies, yes. Watch me breed a mosquito, yes, that will eat and eat and eat a man alive. And yet, let live and live and live. So thinking about Rosie, I was thinking about all the different spaces she occupied. And this next part came from me wondering after the man-made spaces that witnessed her Black body doing work, the stories written in the floorboards and the plaster. Do a sound, turn the lights on. Ha! Did a light bend across her body long enough to take the measure of her there? Do wood keep a taste? How much Southern wood carries the taste of Black girl thigh sweat? What wood wouldn't want it? Ooh, land and flesh. Ooh, wood and water. Happened that I sag, all polished, under her bent knee. Happened that I fill up on her shoe-footed press and sway. Happened that her pain-red hands stay singing blood into my waters. Happened that I need Miss Rosie, don't it? She, my victual, don't it? Her sweet funk season my vitals, sustain them. Can a place have a preference? Lord, no, this place ain't like God, even-sided. Yea, though I do eat of her, her toil aches me still and all. So yeah, when I wrote that my body was a monument, that was only the beginning of the thought. The body does so much work past the work, so much telling past the shape of the thing. Now the question is, do we stay all of the things we've been once we've been them? As you surely understand at this stage, I'm terrifically moved to be speaking to you all today. Calling back to my essay, I should point out that Edmund Pettus, my two greats-grandfather, was actually the younger brother of John Pettus, the governor of Mississippi before and during the Civil War. So speaking during these times in this particular geographical and political space has layers attached to me that I'm still working to understand. Another echo of my article, I am the daughter of one Army guy, the granddaughter of two Black Army guys, and the great-granddaughter and great-great-granddaughter of a man who escaped slavery to join the Union forces and remained wearing the cloth of the nation long after the end of the war. Put another way, the only men I've known alive in my family, my father and two grandfathers, chose to serve their country. I've got a terrific respect and admiration for service to this place. This is something I spoke to in my follow-up Times piece. Again, I'm really trying to use this time, this intellectual and historical space to hammer out some home truths about America as I understand it, about the South as I understand it, its stories, and how we are to memorialize them. Why on earth can I not, in contemplating this place, in this moment, speak out against its ills with one stroke of the pen, and then with unreserved gratitude celebrate its infinite promise? Asking this question moves me to introduce you to my grandfather, Avon Williams Jr. He was the first Black man to be elected to the Tennessee State Senate since Reconstruction. He was Thurgood Marshall's first cousin. He was a civil rights attorney, a veteran, a good and loving man. In 1964, he was interviewed at length by a great American writer, Robert Penn Warren, who was trying to chronicle the Black experience through a project entitled Who Speaks for the Negro? My grandfather said some complicated but important things in that exchange, and I'm going to challenge us all by sharing some of them here. Mr. Warren asked, "Were you in the war?" meaning World War II. And my grandfather replied, "I was. I was drafted in 1943, February of 1943, the 9th of February, as a matter of fact. And I was separated in August 1946, approximately 2.5 years overseas." Mr. Warren asked, "Did the war experience, as it did in so many other people, have some effect on you in your attitude towards the civil rights situation? Was it fixed beforehand, or did it become fixed afterward in developing part of your convictions and career?" My grandfather replied, "I would say that anyone born in the South and reared in the South would have, any Negro with any powers of perception at all would have to have some rather fixed attitudes long before the age that I went into the Army, which was 21 years of age. I would say, however, that some of my attitudes were intensified by reason of the experience in the Army, in a segregated Army, and in some instances in places where the discrimination was just rather open and vicious. In addition to being discrimination in terms of segregated organizations, units, and that sort of thing, such things as PXs and certain other types of discrimination and that sort of thing. Yes, I would say that service in the armed forces did intensify some of the attitudes that I had already developed as a result of my experience as a Southerner. So I say, let's not avoid. Let's navigate. We are dynamic people. We can stand for two things to be true at once. My grandfather returned to the Army and remained as a reservist until retiring at the rank of lieutenant colonel. He could say those things about his experience and still return to the institution where he experienced them, not because he thought it was perfect or even operationally just or was in denial, but because he believed in the idea and he believed in the virtues of the fundamental human condition, and he believed in the capacity for change. Later in the interview, my grandfather got, as the kids would say, even realer. Part of the fear of desegregation, of integration, Warren posited, was that it was hard to believe that Black Americans could really love people who'd just days, months, years, generations before been willing to engage in a system that stripped them of their rights, dignities, humanities. And it is a tall order, the notion of choosing to share space with those who have harmed you or looked away while you were being harmed, or even who just voted for someone who was willing to see you wrong done by. My grandfather had an interesting response to that line of inquiry. He said, "I really didn't say what I should have said about this matter of loving those who hate you. I think that many of us misconceive what loving those who can hate you means. Love does not mean what the white man has traditionally thought it meant. It does not mean being blind to faults. It does not mean being afraid to tell him when he is wrong or when he's being stupid. It does not mean being afraid to fight him in a legitimate way. The love that I'm talking about is the type of love which a very intelligent Christian has for a child. After all, as I see it, although the white man has accused the Negro of being a child in American society, I think that if you look at it realistically, you will find that the white American has displayed the more childish tendencies, that it is he who has failed to accept the responsibilities of the mature man. Take, for instance, his violation of the Negro slave woman, a completely unrestrained and childish impulse that completely ignored the mature recognition of the facts of life or any insights into the future. The Negro woman, on the other hand, I think, although she was unable to help herself, I think history teaches that she has come off far better in terms of demonstrating maturity, a recognition of the responsibilities of life to herself and to her children. The fact that we have so many Negro men now who have gone so far in life is the result of some Negro mother washing and ironing and working hard to get that child into school and to gain an advantage for him. So I say that love involves chastisement. And I think that the white American needs a whole lot of chastisement. It involves other forms of correction. It involves a whole lot of things that we don't think about when we talk about love. I love America. A big part of why I love it, beyond the poetry of its founding documents, is because I have lived in the South. I have lived in Mississippi. I might even love Mississippi most. And in keeping with the question of honoring the honorable dead, I will repeat my grandfather. My love involves chastisement. Call it loving reproach. And perhaps it's time that our loving reproach in this moment involves some redefining of terms. Love, what it means to be here. The question of what, for example, makes the difference between a monument and a statue. I say it's nothing but perspective. We need a perspective adjustment that allows us to continue to evolve into the kind of body politic with a C that we have the potential to be. Monuments become monuments based on the significance ascribed to them. Implicit in that is the idea that there is inherent value in what the monument represents as it's represented. When we resist tearing a monument down, we are reifying, we are supporting the inherent worthiness of its being put up in the first place. I think we have to start thinking about broadening what we choose to remember and how. Identifying the monuments that are not there. To me, they speak louder than the ones that remain. According to the NAACP, Mississippi had the highest number of lynchings of any state from 1882 to 1968. 581. At last count, there were at least 131 official Confederate memorials in Mississippi, which doesn't begin to count things like schools, mascots, and buildings named after those men. Forgive me, but by my rudimentary calculation, if 15,000 Mississippians died in the Civil War, and there are 131 monuments, that's about one monument per every 115 dead. 115 dead. I could say Americans, but they weren't even then. But anyway, to follow through on my point, by that math, even suspending questions of morality and allegiance to country and the notion that all deaths are worthy of public monument and all that, there should be at least 5 significant lynching memorials to all of the colored dead Americans in this state alone. We all know there aren't. 581 lynchings, 581 murdered Black people in Mississippi alone, and I have to go to Alabama to see their names. I know where to go, right in Oxford, right in Jackson, to see memorials to fallen men in gray. From my time as a student at the University of Mississippi, I have a 21st century memory that is vivid and harrowing of waking up to a noose around the neck of the campus's memorial to James Meredith, a Black man with the contested flag draped around his neck. We've got a very great deal of work to do in thinking about what honor means and how we bestow it upon the dead. Love involves chastisement. I love the promise of America. I love the idea of a place that is free and equal, but we are not there yet. Anytime you have to catch yourself telling someone what their truth is, rather than using empathy to try and understand their position through their eyes, you really ought to have a second thought about your approach. You can love your country and want to see it change too. I love Mississippi and know its capacity to change because I've lived it. It's the name of the best part of the place. I want to end this talk with something I rarely indulge in, a moment of optimism. I'm inviting you all today to ask yourself how we in the South can get serious about being real American dreamers. Under normal circumstances, the charge that I'm about to give would be a bit overblown, a bit vainglorious even, but there's never been a time like this, not in these United States, not really. We can't stay looking backward. Don't get stuck in old grievances or spend your time figuring out how to polish old statues. Figure out how to be worthy of the monuments we will build next. Now, I wouldn't be honoring my time in this space, in this state, if I didn't send you with a poem and leave a bit of Rosie here to haunt you too. Give me some fresh salt, Rosie. I said, drip me that good sweat, Rosie. Yes, send it from your top lip, your bent knee, your bosoms between. Keep me salt rich from your hard work to your blue moan. Rosie, keep me full fed on your hands' blood, clean in my river. I know you, girl. I am you, woman. Come and see. Thank you so much for having me. That is me done talking at y'all for now, and I'm really looking forward to engaging in some conversation.